Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to Geeks Watch. Today I'm going to talk about a film called A Few Good Men, image of which you will see here. Uh, Before I start doing this little discussion talk about, I'm going to apologize because I'm not going to remember any of the characters' names, so I'm going to refer them by the actors' names because I know the actors better. I can't remember Tom Cruise's character's name or Demi Moore's character's name or, so I'm just going to say Tom Cruise and Demi Moore. Anyway, A Few Good Men is a military courtroom drama, the premise of which there are two Marines who were stationed in Guantanamo Bay who are being brought up on charges of murdering a fellow officer. It is brought to JAG, the Judge Advocate General's office. The case is given to a hotshot lawyer, who basically, and Tom Cruise's character, who is basically known for doing quick plea bargains, in and out cases, that kind of thing. His superior, a fellow JAG officer, played by Demi Moore, thinks that something is off. And they essentially try and, they don't necessarily set out to solve the mystery of the case of what's going on, but that is eventually what winds up happening. There are details that don't add up. And there's back and forth between the Marines from Guantanamo Bay, led the commander of Guantanamo Bay is played by Jack Nicholson. One of his, I think a third command officer is played by Kiefer Sutherland. Is it Kiefer Sutherland? Yes, Kiefer Sutherland. There's a star-studded cast. Kevin Bacon has a part. Anyone else? So, star-studded cast. So they basically try and, at one point, Tom Cruise, his character realized that he was given the case to kind of keep it quiet, keep it under the radar. And that is what kind of makes him suspicious. Tom Cruise's character is kind of a, he likes plea bargaining because he knows the law well enough. He can just quick plea bargain in and out. He can go back to doing what he would rather do. His goal is to spend as little time in the courtroom as possible, spend as little time working as possible, and just have a good time. And as someone who's been working since he was 12, I can really appreciate that in a person. Demi Moore's character is very passionate, very kind of aggressive, kind of, a forceful character. Secondary role is played by Kevin Pollak, who plays Tom Cruise's friend and assistant. Another character, I think it's J.T. Walsh or James Marshall, I'm not sure. One of those actors plays the actual second in command, the immediate subordinate of Jack Nicholson's character. This film was like top in the box office for the first 2 weeks it was reduced. So excellent film. Some background details that I found out in looking at this film. Aaron Sorkin, the writer, this was initially a play on Broadway for a very long time, so a very successful Broadway play. Another thing, this story was actually based on real events, which was not alluded to in anything that I saw. Aaron Sorkin's sister was actually a lawyer in the Judge Advocate General's office for like 3 years. And, she came across a Code Red case, and some of the details were used in the writing of the play. Not 100%. But he did use elements of the story his sister told him to write this play. Another thing, when Aaron Sorkin wrote this, he was a bartender. And he essentially wrote notes on cocktail napkins while he was working as a bartender, and went home and would type them out in an actual script when he got home. Tom Cruise's salary was about 1/4 of the film's budget. the film had a budget of like 35 to 40 million, and Tom Cruise's salary was 12 million of that. Other little details. There was something else. I have a couple things I want to talk about. There was something else. Kevin Pollak was, I mentioned him. He was like a secondary character. He was a supporting character. And the funny thing is, I remember his performance actually stood out to me more than anyone else's. You know, Demi Moore, Tom Cruise, Jack Nicholson, they were at the top of their game. Kiefer Sutherland, you know, they were big names at the time. Even Rob Reiner, who directed this film, I'd forgotten because Rob Reiner's better known for playing light-hearted family, you know, family-friendly films. This was a serious drama that was a departure from some of his other work. He's known for directing comedies, like I said, comedies, light-hearted family fare. So, you know, all these actors at the top of the game. Kevin Pollak was a character actor known for playing in comedies. So I think that's why his performance stood out to me. Is like this, he played a serious character in a serious movie, which is not something I particularly seen him do previously. So I guess, like I said, you know, you expect these other actors to do their thing. You know, it would be like seeing Jack Nicholson play a goofball. You know, we've seen Jack Nicholson in comedies, but you know, always as a Jack Nicholson character. You know, loud and angry. We wouldn't see him as a Jim Carrey type of character or Steve Martin type character. You know, seeing Jack Nicholson perform as that type of character is kind of like what seeing Kevin Pollak in this film for me was. That's kind of why I bring him up and talk about him, and why I think for me this stood out. His performance stood out because he played a serious actor, a serious character in a serious film, and did it very well. You know, so playing against type for him. I did see an interview recently. It wasn't a new interview, you know, it wasn't a recent interview. It was a couple years old, with Kevin Pollak, which is kind of what made me want to talk about the film itself. He did talk about working on the set, and he talked about how like he was kind of the nobody on the set. You know, all these other actors, you know, they were all really high up there, really well known, really famous. The director, the writer, Aaron Sorkin, was well known. You know, he was the nobody attached to the film. You know, and like he was mentioning that during like the first table read, he kind of cracked a joke, which got some people laughing, and you know, got a nod from Jack Nicholson. So, and he mentioned him working with Jack Nicholson too, which he said that working with Jack Nicholson was not what he expected. You know, when the director said action, Nicholson was totally professional. You know, knew his lines. You know, didn't need a lot of takes, down pat. You know, perfect professional when the cameras were rolling. The minute the director said cut, he would kind of sit back and be like joking and gregarious and friendly and relaxed. You know, and you know, being the new guy, kind of meeting all these big names for the first time. You know, he really kind of enjoyed working with Jack Nicholson for that aspect. And he talked about one scene, the big courtroom scene at the end of the film, where Tom Cruise is having to do his really serious interrogation and his huge long speech to Jack Nicholson. The camera was like by Jack Nicholson's face to give, you know, because the camera is supposed to be from Jack Nicholson's character's point of view, looking at Tom Cruise you know, on the floor of the courtroom. And while Tom Cruise is delivering his intense, serious speech, Jack Nicholson is making faces at him the whole time. Because, you know, the camera's here, the camera can't see it. Jack Nicholson's like, you know, making goofy faces the entire speech, trying to get Tom Cruise to crack up, you know. And, you know, Kevin Pollak and Demi Moore are behind Tom Cruise, and, you know, they're seeing him do all this. You know, the entire room is watching Jack Nicholson like mug it up to try and make people crack. While you know, but the cameras aren't rolling on him. So he said Kevin Pollak was saying that, you know, he enjoyed working with Jack Nicholson because it was, you know, it was a good experience, and that he was a good person to work with. And like I said, that watching that interview was kind of what made me want to talk about the film. Plus, you know, my wife had a huge crush on Tom Cruise when he was in his teens, 20s, 30s, and 40s. So I've watched a lot of Tom Cruise movies with my wife. we have several in our collection. Anyhow, it is a really good film. I have definitely enjoyed watching it, and I've watched it several times. I know it fairly well. So yeah, definitely an A, you know, definitely an A+ movie in my book. I very much enjoyed it, and I don't really go for courtroom dramas often, so the fact that I did enjoy it speaks well of the film. Anyhow, as always, thanks for watching. As always, my stuff is crap. And until next time, good hunting.